Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. I want to welcome everyone joining us today on this exciting event. Our theme today is around navigating cybersecurity project in a complex and somewhat fragile digital environments while delivering business outcomes. We have a wonderful panel and an exciting agenda. If you have any questions, please use the chat function. I'm sure it's gonna be fun, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Before we begin, I want to present our moderator for today, Ami Hoffman. Ami is a cybersecurity leader with over 30 years of global experience helping organizations strengthen resilience and embrace innovation. Ami is the founder of Cutting Edge Security Services, which focuses on connecting emerging technologies with real-world needs, guiding executives and boards to adopt strategies that deliver measurable business impact and advance their cybersecurity journey. Ami is passionate about cybersecurity, based in Melbourne, Australia, and is a proud father of 3 kids. Over to you, Ami.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you for having me on this wonderful event. Thank you, everyone, for joining this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Let me first kick off the event by presenting our host and panel members. My name again is Ami Hoffman, and our host today is Eyal Weintraub. Eyal is the founder and CEO of Presale One, which is a cybersecurity services and innovation powerhouse. Eyal is a cybersecurity veteran with over 25 years industry experience across various executive roles. Presale One specializes in designing, implementing advanced cybersecurity controls, delivering business outcomes in complex environments, while allowing clients to tap into advanced skills and extensive experience across various security domains. On behalf of myself and the panel members here today, thank you, Eyal, for allowing this event to happen. Let me kick off today's conversation by unpacking our main theme for today, and some of the key points our wonderful panelists are going to elaborate in more detail during the event. Looking in the industry, it seems that we're reaching an inflection point where things are becoming harder and harder over time. On the one end of this equation, we have an ever-growing demand for security with a fast-expanding threat surface and the recent myriad of amplified attacks. On the other hand, we have growing complexity, cost pressures, and the volatile nature of many modern digital environments. This creates an extremely difficult climate for security initiatives to steer through. Some of the key points that come to mind: how do we actually manage our way through this complexity while delivering value, the human element, and how this is impacting overall resilience, global skill shortage, and the need to rely more and more on AI to gain the required scale. We will try and tackle this today. With that said, I want to present our panel today. Our first panelist is Chris Hadley. Chris is a pioneer in the field of social engineering and human risk management. For more than 15 years, he has trained and advised Fortune 500 companies, global financial institutions, and government agencies on how to understand, measure, and reduce human-based security threats. He is the founder and CEO of Social Engineering LLC and the Innocent Lives Foundation, the author of 5 books on the science of influence and deception, and the creator of Human Behavior Conference. Chris is known for combining practical psychology, ethical influence, and real-world casework to help organizations build stronger, more resilient cultures of security. Welcome to the panel today, Chris. Our next panel member is Karen Bismuth. Karen is an engineer in computing systems and holds a master's degree in cybersecurity. Karen offers a unique blend of technical expertise and strategic organizational insights. Karen served in pivotal roles across key domains, including organizational governance, audit, cyber threat intelligence, and data loss prevention across both banking and industrial sectors. In her role as cyber threat intelligence analyst, Karen focused on the strategic, social, and cultural aspects of threat collection. Karen is a recognized speaker, presenting engaging cyber shows to corporations, specializing in fraud prevention, awareness, compliance, risk management, and advanced CTI. Welcome to the panel, Karen. Last and not least on the panel, we have a special guest from Google, Bradley Fisher. Bradley is the head of security channels, SMB at Google Cloud Security, based in Texas. In his role, Bradley leads the go-to-market strategy and partner engagement for Google's SecOps and cloud security portfolio across the SMB segment, working closely with global partners to help organizations modernize their SOC and security operations. Bradley is a regular speaker at industry events with Google and other strategic partners, sharing practical insights on detection engineering, Gen AI and security, and the realities of running modern security operations. Welcome to the panel, Bradley. Thank you again for the wonderful panelists, and it's time to kick this off. Let me now invite the first presenter, Chris. Chris is going to talk about the human firewall. Chris is a known authority on human-based penetration testing. He will be focusing on the human pillar, showing us how to move beyond basic awareness training. Chris will share strategies for mitigating behavioral exploitation and transforming employees into human firewalls via actionable human pen testing techniques. Over to you, Chris.
Well, thank you. You make me sound much cooler than I am, so I appreciate the introduction. Can everyone see the screen? Yes? Okay, I want to make sure that we're good.
Please go ahead.
That we're good there. Okay, well, the introduction was great, so we don't need to worry about this. So I'm going to start with a story. We got hired as a company for a nuclear facility that we had to break in broad daylight. So this is not a red team situation like where we're climbing fences, but we had to actually enter this facility broad daylight, and this facility is heavily armed. Actually, every guard there is a retired or ex-SOCOM soldier. So it's not going to be an easy job. Of course, like any job for pen testing in social engineering world, we start with OSINT, open source intelligence. We start digging into this organization, events that are happening, things that are coming up over the next 6 months or so, anything that we can use to leverage. And what we found was that they were going to have a groundbreaking ceremony that was coming up in a few months from when we started this project. And the location was not put anywhere. You actually had to be invited in order to get the location and then be allowed on site. So what we did is we called and told them we were local reporters that wanted to cover the groundbreaking, and we used a local news station that was there, a newspaper station. And our names were put on the list. Within a month, we flew out there, drove up to the place, told them who we were, and we were escorted into the facility, now able to roam free. Now, what is this story all about? Like, why are we talking about fragility in humans? Because we need to talk about how an organization that had literally a 19-foot fence surrounded by barbed wire, enough armed guards to have a small army, and yet they were thwarted by a phone call, a simple phone call. And that's why we need to talk about this topic today and why it is so important. So when we think about human fragility, sorry, I'm saying the word wrong. The human element is always at the center of that, right? And you can spend all the money in the world on firewalls and IDS, IPS, antivirus, and those things are good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not cutting those things. We need those things, but none of those things secure the human element. And that's why this is such an important topic. So as mentioned in the intro, my job is we do a form of pen testing that focuses only on the humans. We focus only on how we actually can expose the gaps in the current project life cycles. But when we look at how most cyber projects run, we scope technology, we design architecture, we configure controls, we integrate with existing systems, we run functional tests, we pass an audit, and then we say, hey, we won. But at no point in the sequence would someone just ask a simple question. Can an attacker still talk a human into walking around everything we just built? And as we see, every breach nowadays, right, in the last few years, has started with something as simple as an email or a phone call. MGM, what's a phone call, right? Clorox, phone calls. Right? These things that we see just with a simple question, they're bypassing all of that spent money. And in my world, I see it again and again. And the bank spends millions on identity upgrades. Technology is really beautiful, shiny, blinky boxes everywhere. And then one phone call to the help desk and we reset a password and we're in. And these stories aren't uncommon. We all know that, right? But when we talk about it, then people oftentimes say, so what's the solution? Is there a solution? I mean, if humans are always going to be at the center of fragility, then what do? Well, we need to keep it simple, but real. So I want to give you a simple model that you can take back to your team. We call it SEVA, a Social Engineering Vulnerability Assessment. And then at the end, I have a little surprise for anyone here who wants to take an assessment to really see where your organization is at. Now, you don't need to remember the acronym, but just remember these three demands, and this will help you remember it all. First, you have to map the human attack paths, right? So every path. And if you have a hard time thinking about that, you need to get someone who really thinks like an attacker, like that kind of an attacker, to help you. I'll give you another short story. One client that we had, we were able to do a credential reset. Then we called that person as the IT department to get their MFA code, and then logged into this person's account and then used his O365 account to send our exploit to the whole company because it came from a trusted source. That was something they said they never even thought of, that they had to actually monitor attachments from known safe addresses. So when you're talking about mapping the human path, the attack path, you have to think about everything. What can be done to convince a person to bypass the security protocols that you've put in place? Second, you want to validate with controlled attacks. Right? Sure, we could sit here all day and talk about it, and I've sat in front of CISOs that say it won't work here, but you have to run controlled social engineering operations. But you have to make sure that the scope is covered in ethics. Yes, we can sit here all day and argue, well, the bad guy's going to do this, the bad guy's going to do that, but I'm not the bad guy. I'm a good guy who's supposed to think like the bad guy. So I don't want to harm your people. I don't want to do things that are going to leave them feeling shame and guilt. That doesn't make any education worthwhile. So you got to really work hard when you're doing phishing, vishing, in-person pretext, that they're tailored to your environment and covered in ethics. And then third, measured resilience, not just awareness. So I can't tell you how many times I start working with a company, they bragging about, oh, you know, our click ratio is like 3%. And I go, okay, that's great. What is your reporting ratio? And they go, reporting ratio? I mean, yeah, how many people report the fish that you send every month? I don't know. So then we start a program with them and we fish them, and guess what we see? Yeah, they might have 3% click ratio, but they have a 0% reporting ratio, which means people aren't interacting with the email at all. They're not catching it and saving the company. You want to measure resilience, right? Because there's always going to be a level of failure when it comes to humans. So measure how resilient are they, and after training, do they get more resilient? When you combine these three areas, you move the human factor out of the land of vague concern and into the same measurable space as your technical controls. So where does your org? And now this QR code takes you to an assessment that I'm calling a security leader or CISO assessment. It takes about 5 minutes. And if you answer the questions honestly, right, and this is between you and the internet. If you answer those questions honestly, you will get an email with a very detailed analytics of where you sit when it comes to fragility from a human standpoint. See, the good news is that URL is coming up, sorry. So the good news, though, is that we don't sit in a silo when we're talking about these things, because we're not just saying, hey, you have to focus on this, but forget all that other stuff. No, not the case. Like today, you're going to hear about CTEM. You're going to hear about threat intelligence, about GRC. You're going to hear about scoping and complex delivery. You know, when he all talks about realistic scoping, this is where the human risk gets built into the project from day zero. When Ami talks about CTEM, this is where you continuously test human exposure, not just technical exposure. When Karen talks about the METRIS, the NIST scores, this is where your human resilience shows up, not just stories, but in the numbers. And when Bradley talks about the human factor in cybersecurity, he shows how modern security solutions strengthen resilience in the face of inevitable human error. So if you get the human piece wrong, all of that becomes fragile. Everything they describe becomes exponentially more effective. So that is why now we get to there. Sorry, I didn't have the link on there when I was talking about it. This assessment, like I was saying, it can survive. If your security cannot survive a phone call, then how is it going to survive a targeted attacker? So here's my challenge to you. Take this assessment, be honest with it, and then look at those attack paths. Use those 3 things that we spoke about. And before you sign off on your next budget or anything like that, ask yourself one simple question. How will we prove that a motivated human attacker cannot simply talk or walk his way into our security? If your team doesn't have a clear answer for that, then you don't have resilience. You have a fragile tactical solution that looks good only on paper. So to help you start closing that gap, we have this vulnerability assessment here that you could take, and it's specifically for cyber leaders, executives, CISOs. It's really 3 to 5 minutes is the most it should take, unless you really think clearly about the things, and you'll be able to see what kind of a score you get when it comes to fragility in the human sense. My hope is that this simple solution might open some eyes so that next time when we're talking about cyber projects, we're not measuring how well you passed an audit, but we're measuring how well you survived an actual attacker. Now, I think we have a few minutes for questions, do we? Did I take all my time, or do we have a few minutes for questions?
We have 2 minutes for questions. By the way, this session is recorded. You can take a picture of the screen. We'll circulate this after the event. If you have a question, you can either raise your hand and put the question in the chat. We do have 2 minutes, so if anyone wants to ask Chris a question, please go ahead.
Well, we can give 2 minutes back to the next speaker.
Yes, we do have some time for Q&A at the end. Thank you so much, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I want to invite our next presenter, Karen Bismuth. Karen is going to talk about operational resilience and building dynamic defenses. Karen will demonstrate how to correlate raw threat intelligence and TTPs with core GSC functions like DLP and IAM, and translate this into verifiable metrics such as quantifiable NIST score in order to prove operational health. Over to you, Karen.
I share my screen.
We can see your screen. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, good. And we are always being told that the strongest attack the weakest. It's not wrong. Or that the smallest agnostic to lose by attacking the biggest. Also not wrong. But what no one ever told us is that we may be at the origin of that attack. And that's exactly the reason that will lead us to become better. Today, I want to tell you a story, which starts like a tiny detail, but can cost a lot. A hint, 234. It sounds like just a number, or a number sequence, or maybe a weak password. But this story contains exactly the weak signals we all miss one day. But before I tell it to you, let me bring you somewhere else. Bluffing. When playing the person earns more than playing the game. Please let me take you far from the corporate world, where the rules are totally different, where the powers are not balanced. Some time ago, a famous marketplace suddenly disappeared. No trace left. The URL stopped redirecting to the website. A few days later, on a famous high-traffic forum, a message announced that the marketplace is back. New URL, same design, same offer, identical. But to enter on the marketplace, you have to pay $100. Hundreds of people paid. Can you see the scam is coming here? But that's not the point. But indeed, it was a scam, carefully engineered by someone else. But this scenario happened in the virtual, not in our current virtual world, but it was
Karen,
on.
sorry to interrupt. Your audio is a bit fake. If you can get closer to the mic, try and improve your audio. Sorry to interrupt.
I can't put my face on the camera. Can you hear me better?
It's just a bit faint. I think it's a bit better. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, great. So this scenario happened not in our current virtual world, but it was on the dark web. In this Shark Tank, even cyber criminals get scammed. No one is untouchable, not even them, not even us. Despite our cyber behavior, we are all a target for someone. And these vulnerabilities also exist in your companies, in your organizations, in your teams, in your processes. So 234, what is it? A fraud or a ransom? You must continuously observe and analyze the behavior. In most attack analysis that I have conducted so far, I have analyzed almost the same pattern. 80% of the time for preparations and 20% of the time for actions. Indeed, cyber criminals observe your access points, understand your maturity level, analyze your behavior, study your internal accesses, and exploit your blind spots. They never rush blindly. The quieter and well prepared their preparations are, the faster their action will be. And the cyber attacks are not always launched by a Russian group or a ransomware gang, but the threats can come from inside of the organizations. In fact, malicious insiders apply the same principle. A weak processes that no one noticed, at least not early enough, and the damage is done. So 234, where does it come from? Is it a lot or not? Know much better your adversary than yourself. A data leak is not an isolated incident. We often reduce it to a misshared document, a missent email, or a clumsy gesture. It's true, but it's the beginning of a much larger scenario. A leak is a breach that can become an entry for targeted attack, source of fraud, a vector for social engineering, lever for identity theft, but also a reversible loss of know-how. What seems harmless at first can quickly turn into a systemic issue if the context is not understood. In my story about 234, it's a number that has not been noticed. This is exactly the type of behavior the company did see, did record, but failed to interpret, neither investigate on time. Poker face, permanent control. In an information system, every action leaves a trace. Every movement of data, every connection, every access, every transfer can raise a signal. Low intensity, low severity, but still a signal. And the big mistake is to focus only on strong signals like obvious volumetric spikes. In fact, the most common incidents don't always start with a red alert, but with a tiny deviations, a rare destination, an unusual time, an increasing frequency. Nothing strong enough to trigger a classic hazard. And the subtle part, these weak signals are often perfectly legitimate when analyzed separately. It's exactly in this narrow window between acceptable volume and detectable anomaly that the most sensitive scenarios take shape. We need to take control of the table and establish respect. 234 is linked to a data leak. But let me add you some context. The 234 data leaks have been performed by only one employee. This, you may think, may be a lack of awareness. These 234 data leaks were performed by only one employee in a record time of 2 days. Now let's have a more investigative twist. These 234 data leaks were performed by one employee in a record time of 2 days, 3 days before leaving the company, with a peak abnormally higher than the department's average. Now, with all of this information, we do have something measurable which can lead to a new company policy. Do you know what made this leak possible? The absence of two fundamentals. The first one, a clear policy restricting external transfer during the notice period. And the second one was a dynamic view of leak alerts. To keep up with this pace, you must be rigorous. If we act like cyber criminals, we invest 80% of our time for preparations, our efforts, our actions will represent only 20% of our time. In other words, solid foundations can lead to any structure to stand. Let's start with two actions. The first one is defining the access rights review. In companies, I have already seen active accounts of people who have already left, no revoked accesses or access rights never updated. You should know that a proactive review of your access can increase your NIST score. The second action, a risk-based approach. Firstly, define your value, the value of your assets. Secondly, list detection and prevention mechanism. And thirdly, establish a gap between what can and cannot be protected and the reason. Then we level up to a dynamic risk-based approach management. A risk is measured according to its probability and its impact. The impact might be relatively stable, but the probability can fluctuate. Real-time monitoring and intelligent anticipation are essential. They protect the strategy, the value, and the company. Your asset, your document, your process, your development library, everything are at risk. But what are their value in real time? In fact, continuous monitoring of cybercriminal activities allows determining your asset's value and then the probability it will be exploited. To conclude, the most important thing in poker is not the cards, it's what you do with them. You can have all the policies, all the tools, whatever you want. But if you are unable to apply them, use them, configure them, they are useless. My grandfather was a PhD in literature. he always told me, you never finished reading a book. In fact, everything is static, but the way you are going to manage it makes it dynamic. In cybersecurity, we have always more to learn, more to secure, because our perception changes, our maturity evolves, our challenges and ecosystem as well. Thank you for your attentive listening. I'm Karen Bismuth, and I was happy to share you my experience. Please feel free to ask any question in the chat relative to this talk.
Thank you so much, Karen. I love the poker analogy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
As our next presenter, we have a special guest from Google, Bradley. Bradley will share context and insights, offering a view from the forefront of cloud security innovation and strategy, reinforcing how the key pillars discussed today help drive resilience in the most complex cloud environments. Over to you, Bradley.
All right. I hope that I'm not too redundant, but I will do my best to make it a little bit different from the awesome presentations we just had. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brad Fisher. And as mentioned, I lead the security channel within Google's commercial segment. And over the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to be discussing the human factor in cybersecurity, a subject often overlooked, as we've discussed, yet statistically the most critical and vulnerable component in any organization's security architecture. When we consider the billions of dollars spent annually on firewalls, encryption, threat modeling, it's clear that companies are investing heavily in technology. But there's a key takeaway today. The most advanced piece of security equipment in your environment is also the most vulnerable, your people. So what we're going to do is explore two major aspects of this human challenge: user fallibility and the cybersecurity workforce crisis, and then discuss how to leverage AI to augment the human element for a truly effective defense. See, when we think of major cyber breaches, our minds often jump to sophisticated pieces of malware or zero-day exploits. However, the vast majority of successful attacks don't exploit a flaw in the technology, but a flaw in human judgment. The human factor is a challenge born primarily out of two things: trust and error. Attackers exploit our natural inclination to trust familiar-looking emails like phishing, or simply wait for a moment of inattention where we make a mistake. If you look at the top attack trends for Mandiant's 2025 report, many of the vectors are fundamentally human-centric. For instance, exploits account for 33% of incidents, but many exploits begin with the user downloading a malicious file. Stolen credentials are 16%, often due to weak passwords or being phished. Email phishing is another 14%. Attackers are bypassing traditional security controls by exploiting the human element. Consider the scale of human error. The average person makes about 35,000 conscious decisions every single day. Only one of those decisions needs to be a momentary lapse in security judgment, like clicking a malicious link in a moment of fatigue, for disaster to occur. The human element is inherently fallible. And the challenge isn't just user error. It's also a crisis of the professional defense sector. Right now, the world is facing a severe global lack of qualified people, which puts an immense amount of pressure on existing teams. For the existing staff, the problem is information saturation, often described as a deluge of raw data. The problem is characterized by noise and data irrelevance. You have too many intel feeds, but too few are actually relevant. The raw data leads to lack of context and actionability, causing massive operational overhead. Threat intelligence, of course, is the evidence-based data, including context, mechanisms, indicators, and actionable advice about existing or emerging threats. And it's meant to shift the team from a reactive to a proactive stance, but you need to be able to leverage it. Google Threat Intelligence, for example, combines massive amounts of data from diverse sources: frontline intelligence from experts who have a detailed contextual view of real-world events, crowdsourced intelligence providing real-time visibility into emerging trends or IOCs, open source intelligence with information on malware, vulnerabilities, and hacking trends, and human curated intelligence with threat actor motivations, TTPs, and likely targets. Now, the volume of this data is staggering, with billions of files, URLs, and over 450 tracked threat groups. Without the proper tooling, though, the sheer volume of raw data like that can lead directly to alert fatigue and burnout for human analysts. They're drowning in alerts, many of which are false positives due to incomplete or inaccurate data, leading to wasted resources. And when analysts are overwhelmed, they miss the threats that actually matter. This is the critical human factor failure. Load. Is it loading for y'all? Huh. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to reshare this. Sorry, guys. Okay. All right. So as I was saying, that's the critical human factor failure. Now, given this dual challenge of user fallibility and workforce scarcity, how does technology fit in? Specifically, how can artificial intelligence help manage this massive flux of threat intelligence? Well, AI's strength is its ability to process the massive volume of threat intelligence data and automate the initial triage process, moving the security operation from manual to assisted and even semi-autonomous. In the assisted state, AI boosts productivity by generating summaries and recommendations. In the semi-autonomous state, an AI agent drives most tasks consistently well, delegating only the tasks it can't automate with high confidence back to the human. This directly solves the knowledge overload issue, reducing manual toil. Now, this shift has a direct and quantifiable impact on the human team. It leads to 65% faster mean time to investigate and 50% faster mean time to respond. Critically, it enables 70% reduction in the time to productivity for junior analysts and allows 35% of the work to be shifted to junior analysts, which directly helps close the staffing gap by quickly scaling the capacity of new hires. However, as we all know, AI is not a replacement for human experts. The effectiveness of any security AI tool must be guided by experienced people. This image perfectly illustrates why the human factor remains vital. The high fidelity feedback loop, specifically here within the Mandiant ecosystem. You see, human security analysts are needed in all scenarios to, for example, curate intelligence, where an analyst feeds their expertise into the agent training process. This ensures that the AI is trained on high quality, relevant data, not just general noise. They help contextualize and prioritize, reviewing the data and ensuring that the agent thinks strategically and reasons with human rigor. They interpret complex, novel attacks that the AI has never seen, ensuring the system prioritizes threats based on the organization's unique risk profile. Really, they develop a strategy, using the AI's refined output to form a cohesive, proactive defense strategy. And this loop ensures the AI agents are consistently learning and improving based off of real-world expert knowledge. The human factor is unfortunately the weakest link in cybersecurity, but it's also its most essential layer of defense. Technology alone can't defend you. Our strategy has to be to equip our people with the defense layer, with AI and other powerful tooling to transform their productivity and capabilities. So what's the takeaway? In my opinion, it's to focus on resilience, not perfection. We must recognize that human error is inevitable, so our systems must be designed to withstand it. We need to invest in our people to bridge the talent gap. Solutions like Gemini in SecOps allow us to quickly up-level junior analysts, thereby making a critical investment in our people, which is an investment in our security. And use AI to augment, not replace. Teams need to leverage AI to manage the volume of threats and toil in order to free up experienced professionals to focus on strategic defense and complex problem solving. I really appreciate you having me with you today to present some of my thoughts. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like to connect at any point or discuss any solutions within the Google security portfolio. Now I'll go ahead and give it back to Ami, and I'm open for any questions that anyone might have in the audience.
Thank you
so much.
That was great.
Thank you so much, Bradley. As our last presentation for today, and before we take some Q&A, I want to take a few minutes of your time to present a recent trend, continuous threat and exposure management, or in short, CTEM. Let me now try and share my screen. Let me go into presenter mode.
Looking good.
Can you see my screen? I'll take
Yes.
this as a yes. Thank you. I want to kick this off. I want to start with the what. I'm sure you heard about CTEM, either through the news or through one of the recent technology vendors you've been speaking to. So what does CTEM really stand for? I'll begin by saying that the principles behind CTEM are not new. It's something that have been around for a long time and certainly have evolved over time. The best way to describe CTEM is as a new framework that guides a more modern approach to risk and exposure management. There's no one prescribed way to go about this framework, but I do believe that over time there will be certain gold standards that the market will adapt to. CTEM presents a more integrated approach to risk and exposure management to provide continuous view and better adapt to recent changes in the threat landscape as well as on the corporate side, and it's important to look at both sides of this equation. I often talk about compliance versus risk-driven strategy, and the fact that many organizations struggle with doing both effectively and at scale. CTEM provides a great opportunity to reflect industry best practices in conjunction with bringing technology innovation and business together to try and build a more effective way to manage risk across the enterprise. There are certainly changes in the technology landscape, and I envisage that over time there will be appearance of certain CTEM platforms. Regardless, this still needs to fit a certain framework, and I'm assuming that over time, every organization will have to build its own CTEM ecosystem, which might look slightly different between one organization and another. So why now? And why the urgency? There are a few good reasons to it. The first driving force is the recent amplification and the nature of modern threats. We have seen growth in attack volume of sophistication in recent years. Recent advancements in AI were certainly embraced both hands by adversaries, which result in a new wave of attacks from deepfakes to advanced social engineering. The rate of change and the variety of threat vectors are just turning traditional approaches ineffective. This cannot scale anymore. The second point is around how much ground we need to cover. Since COVID as an industry, we have opted into remote or hybrid working. Organizations are accelerating on digital transformation and embracing cloud and SaaS, which translates into fast expanding threat surface. Point-in-time security reviews and penetration testing are no longer effective and cannot provide an accurate view of risk. The signal-to-noise ratio is deteriorating, where defenders struggle to see real signals to the noise. We projected an industry more than 52,000 CVEs before the end of the year, which is a 30% increase in comparisons to the previous year. This certainly is getting out of control and cannot scale anymore. The average cost of reach is increasing, and with the global skill shortage, it's very hard for organizations to effectively respond to emerging threats. I speak often about secure by design, but unfortunately, with the balance of forces in many organizations, this remains a textbook term, and organizations are taking a very reactive approach to risk management. Australia, like many other major markets, have seen a spike in serious breaches, which is hurting the economy and hurting us as consumers. If you're not convinced by now, Gartner predicts that organizations adopting CTEM will cut cybersecurity breaches by 66%. That's 2/3 by the end of 2026. We spoke about the driving forces, and at the end of the day, you need to be able to sell the value of CTEM and convincing the rest of the business to come along on the journey with you. I don't believe that CTEM is a once-off initiative, and I also don't believe that CTEM can be fulfilled to the full extent as yet another BAU activity. From my experience, CTEM is a 3 to 5 year journey for most organizations, and you need to plan ahead. If you think buying the next shiny tool is going to solve all your problems, my view, think again. I believe the why is entailed around the following key points. The first point is around managing risk. Security is not a 0 or 1 game. What you want to do is shrink your attack surface and the potential number of exploitable assets that are accessible or potentially accessible to adversaries. CTEM provides a framework to incorporate continuous testing and validation mechanisms to monitor the attack surface in real time and try and keep this to a minimum. And obviously, this is not a once-off, this is an ongoing exercise and things might change. The second point is around gaining a complete and accurate appreciation of how your organization and the respective digital footprint looks like from an adversary perspective outside in. I often talk about the need for the industry to adopt an attacker mindset. CTEM provides a framework that allows you with the opportunity to do this in an automated fashion and at scale, covering on-premise, cloud, and your SaaS ecosystem, incorporating enterprise and supply chain risk. The third point is around demonstrating great progress. I'm sure that as security practitioners, you have heard many times questions like, you asked for the money last year, where's my money gone? Or security is just a sinkhole, show me the return on investments. I started by saying CTEM is a complete framework. It includes metrics, common taxonomy, and if done correctly, security leaders can use this to demonstrate the organization is building resilience and developing actual maturity across key security capabilities. We have to identify the goals, measure the outcomes, and develop a narrative to make it understandable for ExCo and board. CTEM gives you the common grounds to avoid being the next victim. The last point is around industry best practices. This is a great opportunity to properly implement secure by design principles and get developers to take on board security KPIs, to stop working in silos and spread the responsibility for cyber across various different pillars across the organization. CTEM, in a way, can be the silver lining when it comes to modern risk management, but it also requires proper vision and planning to be successful over time. I strongly believe that being good at it is like riding a bike. It requires persistence and practice, practice, and practice again. Above all, CTEM gives security leaders the opportunity to move away from being the no department to becoming the real glue that ensures things don't fall apart while the business accelerates its digital journey to grow the brand and conquer new markets. What are some of the common challenges I see in the market? And this is across the board, not limited to a specific industry or geography. The first common issue is the fragmented nature of many risk management programs, with often the lack of context, which makes it really hard for organizations to drive any informed decisions. You want to be able to answer simple questions like, why are we prioritizing A and not B? And you want to build a simple narrative around this that demonstrates how this is going to impact the overall risk. This may sound easy, but organizations often drown in data, which comes through various different telemetry sources, and struggle with building a narrative around prioritization. Not only do they struggle, they also cannot scale to keep pace with where the business is going. The second point is around the siloed and often technology-oriented approach many organizations are taking. I mentioned telemetry sources. Gartner refers to about 15 different telemetry sources in average in modern environments. This creates a lot of overlap. It comes in different formats and missing the business context often. You need to be able to turn this into a story that actually resonates with executives. Noise level, create a smoke screen, which deteriorates over time. Quite a shocking signal to noise ratios in many environments I engage with. I suspect this is only going to become worse over time. This only means that defenders struggle with identifying the real patterns of behavior and often become extremely reactive, which puts enterprises at a big disadvantage. What we really want is to get a profound understanding of what's out there, what motivates those groups, and how they operate so that we can cross-correlate this with incoming telemetry and business data in real time, again, to drive informed decisions. The last point is around tool sprawl. Now, I'm a security and a technology geek myself, and everyone love to have a shiny tool in their arsenal. but it comes at a cost. I think we all have an opportunity to look at consolidation, better integration, and evolving how things work today to have any chance of keeping up with where the market is going. This is an example, and I want to use this example to look at how we can potentially transform our traditional vulnerability management programs into an effective funnel. I see 4 key principles to ensuring this type of funnel works effectively and at scale across different business facets. The first point is around the ability to reduce noise levels, remove any potential duplications, and build an effective mechanism to see the signal within a sea of noise. This needs to incorporate infrastructure, application and code scans, configuration data, cloud telemetry, audit, and more and more. Take it all on board. And the more, the merrier. The more data points you have, the better the insights you can drive. This needs to scale. And if you, for example, add another hyperscaler tomorrow, you need to make sure this doesn't fall apart. The second principle is around the ability to incorporate business context and other important contexts in real time. This includes metrics such as CVSS, EPSS, and CAV, as well as business context from your CMBD, your risk register, and any other backend information. Obviously, all needs to be done in an integrated fashion, not information kept in an Excel. The third point is around real-time correlation. What we want as an output is a prioritized backlog of items that needs to be dealt with first, along with the reasoning. If you want to engage with the business and ask people to drop everything they're looking at and take certain action, you need to explain why. And this needs to be more than what the vendor is telling you on their recent bulletin. I always say that a good security leader also needs to be a good storyteller and needs to have good storytelling skills. The funnel, in a way, is a mechanism to help you spin a good story when you're talking to your business leaders, your exco board. The last ingredient here is around building the ability to act. Many organizations settle for reporting because remediation does not work outside of normal BAU activities or does not work consistently and at scale. Having a prioritized backlog allows you to measure performance effectively against critical metrics and ensure the business develops the ability to act consistently again and again across various different business facets. This is not a simple left to right flow. It's actually an ongoing process that requires practice and gets better over time. But building an effective funnel is a necessity if you want to survive the next few years. CTEM, like many other things in life, requires preparation and hard work. If done properly, I envisage 6 to 12 months in prep work before getting this properly off the ground. This includes defining your strategy and roadmap, building a business case and budget, developing a common taxonomy, identifying metrics, adjusting the job framework, and aligning responsibilities and KPIs, building governance and operating structure, baselining the current environment, just as a few examples. Above all, CTEM requires a shared accountability framework that can facilitate the creation of the required bridges between technology and the rest of the business. This is absolutely fundamental if you want to avoid this being treated as yet another technology initiative. Once in BAU, Gartner refers to 5 ongoing stages: scoping, discovery, prioritization, validation, and mobilization. I recommend doing this in increments across a multi-year plan. It's important to identify measurable goals and find your initial allies. We all need friends in life. You're specifically going to need some friends on your CTEM journey. That's it for me. Again, happy to take some questions in the end and happy for everyone to connect with me offline.
Great session. Thank you, Ali.
Okay, beautiful. Just to finish our event for today, I want to present a few questions to our panel members. I'll start with you, Chris. And again, let's try and keep this to a minimum, conscious we have about 4 minutes left. How in your mind should security leaders operate to create strategic alliances with the rest of the business? And how do you convince the business that security is actually not just a CISO responsibility, but something that needs to be spread across other leaders in the business? Over to you, Chris.
You ask a question that could be its own speech. So whenever I get asked this, I think the easiest, quickest answer is the CISO and his group need to ask a lot of questions. They need to be very curious about other parts of the business. They need to first understand what is important to that business sector, and then ask for a lot of advice instead of tell. We oftentimes in this industry tell people what they need as opposed to asking. And when you ask, you get a good conversation going. Conversation is what opens up doors to collaboration.
Beautiful. Thank you. Bradley, one question for you. We spoke about the complexity and volatile nature of modern environments. In this challenging climate, how do you actually demonstrate progression? And how do you measure success and return on investment from your experience?
From my experience, it has a lot to do with the employees, right? It kind of goes back to the people. If the people feel like they're not chasing down, dead ends, they're not chasing false flags, they feel like they're in the SOC getting measurable results and feeling like they're, at the end of the day, not going to pull their hair out, that's what we actually see is the biggest benefit, right? Because it means that they're focused on actually tackling the issues that matter and getting out in front of the threats that are at the front door. If you can walk into work and walk into your security operations center and focus on achieving a goal and actually achieve that goal by the end of the day, that's progress.
Thank you so much. And one question for you, Karen. As an industry, again, your view from your experience, are we really spending money to build resilience or merely spending money to pass the next audit and keep the executives happy? From your experience? You're on mute.
Great, thanks. According to my experience, it depends on the charisma of the person who is auditing the cybersecurity part and handling the secure part. I mean, if they are concerned according also to its culture, according to its backwards, all of these elements are very crucial to deeper understand if they are invested in securing their processes, their teams, or is just for having a score or having as the audit, as you mentioned in the question.
Thank you so much, and we are right on time. First, let me take this opportunity to join everyone joining us on this wonderful event this morning, afternoon, evening, depends on where you are. Thank you for our panel members and our host today. Again, this session is recorded. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, ask any questions. And if you're keen to have a more detailed conversation around any of the topics presented on the event today, again, feel free to reach out and we'll be more than happy to secure some more time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.